Hey, it's Jeff Hyman, your startup therapist, where we focus on the people part of startups. And I'm joined today by Carrie McComb. Hey, Carrie.
Hey, how's it going, Jeff?
It's very good to see you here. Carrie is the Director of Talent for WyzAnt. Now, if you're not familiar, WyzAnt is a very successful and rapidly growing online education company. As I understand it, Carrie, you kind of are a marketplace that connects tutors across the country with students across the country. And those could be, I guess, students or adults, correct? Children or adults?
Any kind of learning, for sure.
Got it. Fantastic. So that's a fascinating business. Obviously, people are a big part of it. And today we're going to talk about how you've successfully recruited the team to WyzAnt. Now, previously, you were in similar types of recruiting roles at Groupon, help me out, at Braintree, I think?
Braintree.
Yeah, which was acquired by PayPal, is it?
Mm-hmm.
So you've had some really great experience. Obviously, you know what you're doing when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah, so I started a couple years back in scaling Groupon, and I was the first tech recruiter there. It was an interesting experience, and then we moved on to Braintree after that, and same thing, mostly engineering and technology hires. And then I kind of wanted to expand my horizons and try something a little bit different. So here, everything incorporated HR. And all hiring across the board. So.
Okay, so good sized company, venture funded,
yeah.
rocket ship. Let's talk about how you've done it. You've obviously recruited some just fantastic talent to the company and to previous companies. What do you think you would define as an A player or a rock star? What are the characteristics that you see consistently across these people that really make a difference, regardless of their role, regardless of the amount of experience?
Some of these things sound so cliche, but like an executor. I think that particularly in small companies and small teams, you need someone who's actually going to do the work. I think some people have to be able to, in certain positions, play strategy and execution and know when to step back and go forward with one or the other. But, someone who is willing to come in and, for lack of a better way of saying it, get their hands dirty, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly important because we're not the size of a company where we can say like, hey, yeah, sit back and just tell me what to do. Like there's no role for that.
So people that get shit done, what else do you look for in terms of rock stars?
People who are just generally excited about what they're doing and like can be, one of our core values here is actually be resourceful. And like, to me, that's my core value because I want to look around and say, okay, what shit can I get done? I'm not waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I am going in and saying, okay, this is missing. Here's how I'm going to fix it. And that's what we want. Like we want someone who can come in to any of these organizations and kind of hit the ground running.
Right. So let's use just those two characteristics and let's talk about how to find them. So you're in the interview process and you're looking for people, as you've described, Carrie, that get shit done and don't need to be asked to get it done. They find the stuff that needs to get done. How do you ask questions that get out and determine whether that person fits those characteristics?
That's an interesting question, and I think that there's a couple things you can do, and this is one that's very controversial in a lot of organizations. But I like exercises, whether it be take home or in office exercises, because what someone does with an exercise, like I can tell you X plus Y equals Z, go figure it out for me. You can say, yeah, that's easy. You just answered your own question, the end. Or you can say, okay, well, let's think about it this way. Let's do this. Let me map this to this. And you can get so much out of asking one question to a person and telling them to go away and figure it out.
So you're looking for their thinking process. You're looking for how much effort they put into it, whether they go the extra mile.
Right, exactly. It's not just, and can they articulate their visions? Can they actually, you can get so much out of a question like that. Again, it's not for every organization. It takes time and it's also, there's where the, another one thing that kind of comes in is just passion for the company. And like, I don't need you to be rah, here, I'm here. But what I do want is for someone to say like, yes, I'm excited enough about this opportunity that I'm going to put in a couple extra hours and do a homework assignment.
So let's say you've got, let's use two examples. Let's say a software developer and let's say some kind of customer service or sales type of customer facing role. What would be an example of a homework assignment or a job test, if you will, that you could use for both of those roles?
Separately, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a software engineer, basically you can have them build a content management system. You can have them build anything, like, and just say like, hey, using this language, please build me this. Take the parameters are 2 hours, and here's the outcome we want to see. Build it. And then for a customer service person, we actually do an online written assessment, which is just basically like, hey, I'm calling and here's my challenge. How do you respond to me?
I see. Got it. So these are real life examples, real life exercises. And then what do you say to someone that might say a candidate that you're interested in, but they're currently working, they're passive. Let's say you've reached out to them, not someone that's applied for a job. And they say, I'm busy, I'm working, I have a job. So they opt out. And that might be exactly the person that you want. Do you try to convince them not to opt out? Do you pay them for their time so that there's no free lunch? What do you do in a case like that?
Yeah, I've thought about the payment thing. We've never really gone to that place. But what I do with those people is I flip the switch a little bit. I'll say, okay, like you've talked to me, you're really excited about this opportunity, but yeah, I totally understand the timing thing. Let's put you on the phone with the hiring manager. Let's start going through the motions and like make sure that this is a good opportunity, because the farther along you are and the more people you've spoken to, the more inclined you may be to do something. Yeah. But then like you can do whatever you want with any kind of homework challenge, right? You can say, okay, you don't want to do it then, come in and whiteboard it out for me. Like there's so many different ways you can make it still happen without giving them, something to take home and work on for 15 hours.
Got it. I understand. It doesn't have to be so onerous that they opt out of the process.
Exactly.
How do you think, Carrie, about active job seekers, people that apply for a position versus passive job seekers, people that are not looking and you reach out to them or your team reaches out to them? How do you think about the mix? Which do you focus on first? What are you finding relative to those two?
It depends on what you really want, right? Like if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, like if you need a very specific position, which I would argue if you're a smaller team, you probably don't, you're probably going to go look for those and target those passive people who have this very, very specific skill set and have worked in this type of company before. But if you're not, I would recommend like the people coming in may be just as great as someone who may not have necessarily found you before. So I don't really have a preference unless you tell me that like I'm literally looking for, someone who has worked at Oracle before for 12 years. Like which probably not, but yeah.
What's the single best source of candidates these days that you use, that you kind of live and die by? And does it rhyme with LinkedIn?
No, I don't even like LinkedIn.
No kidding. Tell us about that.
Because listen, how many times, do you know how many engineers who I've worked with in the past, I don't know why this is funny to them, but they send me the emails they get from recruiters and they just like write ha 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 at the top. And I was like, please stop sending me this. I'm not your recruiter anymore. Right. I don't need to help you with this.
Right.
It's so generic now. It's so used. It's overdone. And so like you have to come up with different ways. My favorite place to find candidates right now is AngelList.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now what types of candidates?
Every type of candidate, everything from marketing to engineering to like product. I have found so many, and the types of people you're going to find on there are the people who want to work at a startup. And I think that those are the types of people who are willing to kind of do a little bit of everything and be more flexible. Like the folks I've hired from, I've had some success hiring from there, but I've also had success just networking through the site because people are passively looking on there or actively looking. It doesn't really matter. But one thing they are is they're willing to talk. And there's been a lot of great connections to come out of there for me.
Got it. Speaking of connections, tell me about employee referrals. So you're a founder of a 10, 20, 30 person company and you're hiring. What role should employee referrals play? Should you pay? Should you not pay? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you should always pay. I mean, I've started at companies where we haven't paid and then we've learned to pay. When the argument for not paying is that you're smaller, you want your friends to work here, like it just comes naturally and that's wonderful. However, like you might as well. I personally think it's just worth incentivizing because we all know the statistics on employee referrals. So it's worth it. And I've seen anywhere from, some companies offer like $1,500 to $2,500. And if you don't have a ton of money, like it's not a big deal. Offer $500. Offer free dinners. Like do something to incentivize it.
Something to keep it front and center.
Exactly.
But would you say that's the number one recruiting method or tool that you would rely on if you could only pick one?
Yep. Of course. Okay. It's easy. It's a proven fact.
Got it. So let's say it's not an employee referral. It's someone that no one in the company has connections to. And so they've gone through the process. They've done the homework assignments. They've gone through the battery of interviews. Let's talk about reference checking. Reference checking is something that a lot of companies abuse, misuse, or don't do at all. What have you learned about reference checking to make it actually useful and instructive in making a decision?
This is probably the wrong answer to this question, but what I will tell you is I love reference checking because I find new candidates from it. So I was like,
Great.
Hey, are you interested?
Yeah, so how do you do that?
So the first thing I do is I never ask scripted questions on a reference check. I just say like, well, of course I have guidelines and general guidelines I follow. So what I'm really looking for, and particularly if it's a manager of someone who we're looking to hire, is what would you do to make that person more successful is my favorite question. What would you do to encourage them? Where do they need to be better? And I think asking how they can be more successful is a great way to do that. But then like just saying, how long have you worked together and what capacity? I guess those are all fine because they open conversation. But really what you want to get to is you want to say, hey, so this person obviously trusts you to be the reference. Let me tell you what they'll be doing for us.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
How is that? And then it actually very easily can turn into, oh, let me tell you what we're doing. This is cool. And, some interesting follow-up. And it's just another networking engine.
Now, do you do the references or does the hiring manager do the references?
Depends on the role. Most of the time, the hiring manager steps in and does that. In some situations, it might be me. It really depends on when you decide to check too. Like, quite frankly, like some people wait till after the offer. I like to check a little bit earlier in the process.
So to that end, do the reference checks actually influence whether or not an offer will be made?
Yeah.
So you're actually using them the right way as opposed to after the fact where you've already extended an offer.
You can do both. Yes. Okay. There is a right and a wrong. I guess there is a little bit. I used to use them as the other way, and then I just use them as a recruiting tool, to be very honest with you, because, and also like a lot of people don't give you a reference of the person like who's going to give them a poor reference, right? Yeah. So how you're supposed to, and how I think you should use it is not trying to get bad information from the person. You're supposed to be using it to figure out how you can most likely help that person to succeed.
How to set them up for success when they start. What about backdoor references? So people that the candidate does not give you, that you're able to find on LinkedIn or other places that are connected to that person. When does it make sense, or does it, to invest time to find those people?
Yeah, that one's a slippery slope. And it's actually and particularly when you live in small technology towns, it's very easy to know somebody who knows somebody. Yep. And I worry doing it too soon. You don't want to tip anyone off. You don't want to get that person in trouble, particularly if you're going through someone who works at their current company. Like, that's pretty much an off limits. Like, That's just not fair to them. However, if it's someone who worked with them previously and you know that person, I would do it right around the same time as like in-office interview, so that you can almost use that person to effectively help you interview better. Yep. Hey, where was this person lacking when you worked with them? Like, would you recommend working with them again? And perhaps even get some tips to say like, okay, interviewer, like go in and focus on this subject.
Got it. Okay, so last topic in the process after reference checks is the negotiation. So we're talking money. We're not going to get into specific dollar amounts here, but what have you learned about how to make that happen? I've seen many processes where they get to the end and then there's a big disconnect. They find out there's a big surprise that the offer is way less than the candidate was expecting, or way more and they overpaid. How do you manage compensation through the process so that at the end it's not a big deal breaker?
Yeah, it's the first conversation I have with people. It's not the first thing I ask them. That would be weird. But what I do is I start with a full conversation. And then if it's feeling really positive, I'll say, okay, what's the salary breakdown look like for you? Now, if we get to the end and they give me a totally different number, well, that's weird. But it's also that's not the challenge. The challenge at the beginning for me is managing expectations throughout. And, some people you obviously get people who will say, hey, I don't want to give you this information. It's too soon. But what I usually respond to that to say is, it might be too soon, but don't you want to manage expectations throughout this process? So
you will try to find out early on, and just so I'm clear, are you talking about do you start with what the position pays, or are you trying to understand what they currently earn?
So it's hard when you work at a company that's small, because quite honestly, you could be looking for an engineer, and that person could range from like a junior mid-level person to like a super senior person. Yeah. And as long as they have the right skill set, like you're willing to pay for it, right? So I try not to come up with these. We have ranges, don't get me wrong. Sure, and if someone says like, is that within your range? Like, I will likely tell them, but like the ranges are kind of big and scope. So it's hard to narrow that down. So what I try to do is start with them.
Got it. And towards the end of the process, are you targeting a specific percentage increase that you've learned in your experience is required to incent people to make a move? Have you learned that, unless it's at least 10% more, 20% more, 50% more, what have you learned about that?
Yeah, I usually try to gauge around 7 to 10%.
10% increase.
Yep.
You found is sufficient to get people to consider.
7 to 10 typically,
7 to
but
10.
then of course, like you have your benefits and you have all the other stuff that comes into play. And like you also hope that there are some people who, even if that doesn't work for them, and unfortunately, some people tend to take lateral moves because they're looking for a different environment or they're looking for other factors. But the people who most people, when they make a move, you'll notice will ask for 7 to 10% increase.
Got it. I understand. Okay, so let's have some fun. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see founders, entrepreneurs, early stage companies make when it comes to this whole process? It can be any part. We talked about compensation and reference checking and interviews and homework. Where do people go wrong, and what can we as founders do differently to make sure we don't repeat those mistakes? Yeah.
So here's one of the first ones. And again, some of what I might say is probably a little controversial depending on who you're speaking to.
I like controversial.
Oh, good. Perfect. I'm glad we're in this. Yeah, we're here. Here's the deal. Like, I think that giving people titles and like very specific titles when you're an organization of 4 people is a really bad idea. Like, I don't care if you want to call people member of technical staff. Sometimes I actually like that better because you want to be flexible. You want to leave that door open for other folks. And like the people you hire at 4 employees are going to be very different from the people you hire at 20 employees.
So some people say titles are cheap. Give them any title they want. Who cares? You don't agree with that mindset?
I don't agree with that because at some point, like depending on how you scale, like you have to organize, right? And I think that in order to organize, like you want to make sure you haven't given some people like, now I have 4 directors,
4 VPs of technology, right?
Totally. What do I do with all that? And then like nobody doing, and then where are the engineers? And people get, people start to look at that and they're like, wait a second, like let's organize this. And so unfortunately it's going to end up upsetting folks, I think, in the grand scheme in the long run. But that aside, like I think another thing, and we already kind of touched on this, is like hiring people who are a little bit too strategic and not the individual contributors enough at the beginning, because you can't really set those folks up for success. And maybe some people just really need that person. But if you have 7 executors, it might be time to hire that strategic person. But I think kind of going in and expecting someone from a pretty high level to kind of come in and like do all that dirty work, it doesn't always work. It might work for some people, but
you're saying early on, especially early on, err on the side of action. People that get stuff done versus thinkers that might be great thinkers and presenters, etc., but can't move the business forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Got it.
And then I think the other one that I would really mention is like try to calculate be a bit more. You have to be strategic when hiring, and I hate that I just used that word like 4 times in 2 minutes, but like I think that coming up with a game plan as to what you might need. Like if I hire this person, then I might need this. Like if I hire a product manager, I should probably make sure they have engineers to support
them. So you're
them.
saying from a chess perspective, think 2 steps ahead, org structure wise, in terms of ratio of sales reps to developers or developers to managers, that kind of thing?
That kind of thing, yes. And like, I think some companies have that like, oh, well, we have some money, so let's just go hire, and we'll hire anyone who can be like valuable in this organization, and we'll hire, and athletes are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't hire the generalist, but like I think that you have to be careful, right? Because then if you have too many of this and not enough of this, like you're not going to get the work done. So it's kind of like going out and saying like, I'm going to be sales heavy. I'm going to build this org in a sales way, but then I'm going to hire engineers slowly. But once I have enough engineers, they're going to automate this process, and then I'm kind of stuck with like all these folks who I hire. I think that you just have to be more you have to calculate who you're hiring and at what time you're hiring them.
And to do that, the senior team, the leadership team of the business, has to really be oriented and be on the same page about where the business is going and when, so that from a talent perspective, there can be a talent strategy.
And not only that, I think you also have to keep it flexible, right? Like that shouldn't be written in stone. It should be almost like iterative, right? Yeah. Like you should be checking in every 2 weeks to say, okay, we hired these 3 people. Yeah. Does it still make sense?
Got it. Fantastic. Carrie, this is so helpful to founders. How can people learn more about WyzAnt or get in touch if they're interested in learning more?
They can call me on my cell. No, don't do that. You could. It's cool. I'll answer it. No, I would love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I guess I still use it once in a while for personal networking. But yeah, people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you can find my email out there in the space as well. So anyone's welcome to reach out.
And WyzAnt is WYZANT.com.
That's it.
Fantastic. This has been great. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing the time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.